So, let's get right into it. When the Civil War finally ended in 1865, the United States was, and I mean this literally, a nation in ruins. We're not just talking about rebuilding cities. No, this was about rebuilding the country itself. It was a monumental task, trying to figure out how to put a broken nation back together and, at the same time, answer this brand new question. What does freedom actually mean for millions of newly freed people?
So, the war's over, the fighting is stopped. The big question hanging in the air was, what now? This whole era of rebuilding, which we call Reconstruction, really boiled down to three enormous, and I mean enormous, questions. And how the country answered them would shape, well, everything that came next.
Think about it. How do you let the southern states back into the Union? Do you forgive and forget, or do you punish them? What rights do you give to millions of people who were considered property just months before? And who even gets to decide all of this? The federal government in Washington or the states themselves? You can imagine the answers to these questions were not easy. They were fought over tooth and nail, and it led to this decade of just incredible conflict, some amazing progress, and then, sadly, a pretty painful retreat.
All right, so that brings us to our first section, the first big hurdle, leadership. You've got this incredibly fragile situation, and as we're about to see, 4 different presidents had 4 very different ideas on how to move forward.
You know, you had everything from a push for quick healing all the way to a bitter, knockdown, drag-out power struggle. You had a president trying to forcefully defend civil rights, and then finally a backroom deal that basically ended the whole thing. Each one of their approaches really did set the stage for everything that happened next.
So first up, you have Lincoln. His vision was all about healing the nation quickly. His 10% plan was super lenient. Basically, let's forgive the South and move on. But of course, he was assassinated before he could see it through. And that's when Andrew Johnson takes over. Johnson was, well, he was a whole different story. He was all about states' rights, and he clashed, dramatically with Congress. He let former Confederate leaders right back into power and started vetoing bills designed to protect freed people. It was a complete reversal. This power struggle got so bad, so intense, that Johnson became the first president in U.S. history to be impeached. It was a huge deal. Congress was so fed up with him blocking everything that they basically set a political trap, and he walked right into it. Now, he was acquitted in the Senate, and get this, by a single vote. Can you imagine? But the whole ordeal pretty much paralyzed his administration. Okay, so while this fight between the president and Congress is raging, a new group steps into the power vacuum, the Radical Republicans. And let me tell you, their name was no accident. They were not interested in a quick, let's be friends again reunion. No, their goal was to fundamentally remake the South and secure real, tangible rights for African Americans. And to do this, they did something absolutely monumental. Congress passed 3 amendments to the Constitution. Now think about that. These weren't just laws that could be changed later. They were writing these new rights directly into the fabric of the country. We're talking about the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. This was, without a doubt, the absolute high point of what Reconstruction promised to be.
But here's the thing. While all these incredible new rights are being written into law up in Washington, D.C., a much, much harsher reality is taking hold down in the South. Southern states started passing these restrictive laws called black codes, and their purpose was crystal clear: to control the labor and the lives of newly freed people, basically to keep the old social order as intact as possible.
Just take a look at the language from this one in Mississippi. It sounds all official, right? Shall be deemed vagrants. But what is it actually doing? It's making it illegal to not have a job. So if you're a freedman and you can't prove you're employed, you get arrested and fined. And if you can't pay the fine, well, the sheriff just hires you out to a white landowner, often your former master, to work it off. It was, for all intents and purposes, slavery by another name.
So to try and fight back against things like the black codes, the federal government created something called the Freedmen's Bureau. You can think of it like a massive post-war relief agency. Now, it was seriously underfunded and faced incredible resistance, but it did provide critical support. It gave out food and housing, and maybe most importantly, it established thousands of schools all across the South, creating the first real opportunity for education for so many.
All right, a new section. And this is where things start to turn. The push for equality was met with a brutal, violent, and highly organized backlash. And as the years dragged on, the nation's will, especially in the North, to keep up this difficult, expensive, and frankly bloody fight, well, it started to fade. But not without a fight.
When Ulysses S. Grant was elected in 1868, he took a hard line. He wasn't messing around. He used the full power of the federal government, including the army, to go after and suppress terrorist groups like the Ku Klux Klan. For a while, it actually worked. His actions allowed black men to vote and hold political office in numbers never seen before or since for a very long time.
But here's the problem. Even if you had political rights, economic freedom was a whole other battle. Most formerly enslaved families had no land and no money. So many ended up in a system called sharecropping. On the surface, it sounded okay. You work a piece of land, you get to keep a share of the crop. But in reality, the landowner, who was almost always a white man, controlled everything. He sold you the seeds, the tools, the food, all on credit at insane prices. At the end of the year, you were almost always in debt, meaning you were legally trapped on that land for another year. It was a vicious cycle.
And as you can see from this timeline, the momentum just couldn't last. It was like a perfect storm of problems. You had the continued violence in the South, you had major corruption scandals rocking the Grant administration, and then the big one, a massive economic depression hits in 1874. Suddenly, people in the North had their own problems to worry about. Their support for the expensive, complicated project of Reconstruction, it just evaporated. They were tired of it.
And the final nail in the coffin? It was the classic, smoke-filled, backroom political deal. The presidential election of 1876 was a complete mess, totally disputed, so a deal was cut. It's known as the Compromise of 1877. Basically, the Republican Rutherford B. Hayes gets to be president, but there's one huge condition. He has to pull the last of the federal troops out of the South. And with those troops went any federal protection for African Americans. Just like that, Reconstruction was over.
So, why does any of this history matter? What's the big takeaway? The thing to understand is that Reconstruction was both. It was a massive, even radical success, and at the same time a profound, tragic failure. It's not a simple story, and its legacy, as we're about to see, is absolutely still with us today.
This right here really gets at the heart of the contradiction. On the one hand, the successes were absolutely revolutionary. You have equality written into the Constitution for the first time. You have men who were literally enslaved just a few years before, serving as U.S. senators. That's incredible. But on the other hand, the failures were just as staggering. The country completely failed to protect those new rights long-term, which paved the way for almost a century of segregation, voter suppression, and Jim Crow laws.
And if you want to see the real-world consequence of that failure, just look at this number. 100. What is that? What does 100 mean here?
That's about how many years it took. 100 years. After Reconstruction ended and all the progress was wiped out, it took nearly an entire century before another black person from the South would serve in the U.S. Congress. 100 years. And that really brings us back to where we started. How do all these debates from 150 years ago, about federal power versus states' rights, about the real definition of equality and citizenship, how do they still shape our world today? The truth is, the struggle to answer those core questions of Reconstruction, it was never really finished. And you could argue that that struggle, in so many ways, remains one of America's most enduring challenges.